It's the Sittin Sportside podcast.
Can't wait.
With Mike James.
Come on, man.
Cody Marshall.
Did you just get here? Can you give him your notes?
And Eric Hanman.
I have dedicated my life to this team, okay?
On 1045theteam.com. Darnold drops back. He fumbles and it's loose. And USC loses to Washington State. That's not really how it went, but
Who's that on the call?
Not a bad job there by Mike James. Welcome into the Sittin Sportside podcast. It's going to be a college football edition. And I'm going to start us off with something called I Told You So, and I Hate to Say It. Where we're going to go around and we're going to give you something that we thought was definitely going to happen going into this college football season, along with Eric Hanman and Mike James. I'm Cody Marshall. And then also something that we really don't like to see in college football, but we hate to admit that that is exactly what we're seeing right now. So I'll start us off with the I told you so, and I can segue right off of what Mike James just told you in saying USC is overrated. This is a pick that a lot of guys had, even some of the big analysts had, being one of the top 4 teams in the country because of their quarterback play of Sam Darnold. But let's face it, Sam Darnold has thrown a whole 3 weeks into the season, he was at 7 interceptions. I think that number's gone up now, but this team has sputtered. They barely got by a Texas team that is not performing very well despite having first-year coach Tom Herman, and Texas probably should have beaten them in overtime. And they were also without their starting quarterback in Shane Buechele in that one as well. So Mike Leach finally gets his Washington State Cougars the marquee win that he needed, and they look like they could be a force to be reckoned with in the Pac-12. I'll move over to Eric Hanman, or if you guys want to.
Yeah, what are we doing again?
Take this. You can go on to what your I told you so. Something that you thought was definitely going to happen in this college football season.
All right, well, and I told you so is on 1045theteam.com. We did our college football previews. There's a lot wrong with maybe stuff that I said, but there's one good thing at least that I said. I said that Miami would win
Miami.
They would win the ACC. Now, obviously, that didn't happen yet, but they've looked very, very good in the early going here. They had a few games canceled like a lot of Florida teams have, but they moved to 3-0 with a dominant defensive performance against the Duke Blue Devils, which you're saying, oh, well, Duke's only good at basketball, but they were 4-0 going into that game in the ACC showdown between them. Malik Rozier, I thought, looked really good as well, the quarterback for the team. So I like what Miami has shown. We already knew the defense was going to be really good, and that's what has shown in those games. And as long as they can score enough points, 31, solid, hold them to 6. They looked very good early going. It's going to come down to the rescheduled game against Florida State, which probably isn't going to be as tough of a matchup as it once was, right, with Francois now out for the season for a while now. But for the last couple of games, they haven't looked fantastic. They've lost twice, Florida State has. So it's going to be less of an important game. It's going to come down to whether they can be Clemson or not, which we'll find out. But that's my I told you so. Miami Hurricanes looking like they could be back on top like they used to be in college football. Not about on top, but really good team.
Yeah, I mean, Florida State's one of the teams that's really surprised me of how poor of a season. And not only that, is they almost dropped a contest against Wake Forest this week. So you think that this is a Florida State team that potentially could have been 0-3 heading into their game with Miami, now could still be 1-3. I don't like where Jimbo Fisher's team is going. I get it. There's a lot going on when you consider Florida was ravaged by the hurricane and everything, and so there's a lot more than just football. But the Seminoles are off to about as bad a start as you can
They also
imagine.
lost their starting quarterback, too, though.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
that's cost them big time.
I get that, but now they're also talking about how bad that Florida State offensive line is, and this is the second year in a row that they're talking about it. And this, I mean, it doesn't matter who's at quarterback if your offensive line can't stop anybody, and so you wonder, even if DeAndre Francois was healthy, how well this team would be playing.
Yeah, man. Mike James, you have one? I mean, you probably are going to bring Oklahoma into it, if I guess.
Yes. I can't really prove that this isn't I told you so.
Yeah, you can because you're an Oklahoma fan.
Yeah, but the Oklahoma-Ohio State game a few weeks ago,
okay.
Can I just say I thought Oklahoma has stood a great chance in that game. And even though a lot of people said, oh, Ohio State's at home, blah, blah, blah. To me, the Buckeyes are just overrated. Yes. Whatchamacallit, God, what the hell is his
Urban
name?
Meyer.
Urban Meyer, thank you very much. He's a great coach, but it was like his days in Florida when he had Tebow, et cetera, how good they were. Tebow left. They kind of fell off the wagon a little bit.
He left the team for health.
Yeah.
For health issues and whatnot. He got and to quote someone, to quote a fellow board operator from this team, from the 105 team, she's not here anymore, was a massive Ohio State fan. If you actually read Urban Meyer's memoir or whatever, Urban Meyer, after leaving Florida, apparently, and this is just, I didn't read it, but it's out there, so I'm going to trust that this diehard Ohio State fan knew her stuff. He decided to care about the players now. Before, he was just a football coach. Now he's a football coach that cares thoroughly about his players. So I don't think he's an overrated coach at all. Or did you say he was
No, he's not. He's a great coach. I just think that team itself is overrated.
And I kind of backed that up. JT Barrett, I think, is still trying to find himself, and I still don't think he's the answer as a starting quarterback in the Big Ten.
No, he's not a Big Ten quarterback. He's more of a I think he'd fit better in the SEC, the Big 12.
I didn't even know that he would, because you look at how bad he can be
at his
worst, and he just...
I just couldn't doubt this team. Ohio State, they consistently get back to the college football playoff and win big games when they have to win big games.
I understand that, but I don't think
Although
he's
I'm a
the
big
kind
Penn
of guy
State
that's going to
guy,
get you a national championship.
I'm not a big Penn State guy, but I'm a big
game.
believer in the Penn State and Nittany Lions. I'm going to clear that up. I'm not a fan of the Penn State Nittany Lions, but I really think that they've also been very impressive.
The Sandusky.
So it's going to be. I would agree with you guys that I think Penn State would beat Ohio State, but I'm not sure. Yeah, overrated maybe.
Mike,
just the thing, because let's say the expectations for Ohio State are extremely high. So from that perspective, because everyone thinks they're going to be this team that they were when they won it, 3 years ago? Yes, in that 2 years ago.
Can I get my?
It's 3 years ago now, isn't it? It was the first year of the college football playoff. You had Ohio State win it, then you had Alabama, and then you had Clemson.
Bama beat Clemson, and then they lost to Clemson this year. So it was 3 years ago.
So, yeah, so I think because people have that stigma, and then they made it again last year, there's a stigma that this team's going to be really good. So to your point there, they probably are overrated because people think probably they're just as good as they were when they did win it all.
Can I throw my, I hate to say it, butt in right now?
Well,
Sam Darnold.
Next.
Absolutely going to be a bust in the NFL. He's going to be another Ryan Leaf. Hands down.
I hate to say it, but is actually a piggyback off of his I told you so.
I'm not saying Sam Darnold's a bad quarterback. I'm just saying USC, it was wrong for people to say that USC was going to be as good a team as they
And Mike's going farther and saying that
he's going to be another Ryan Leaf.
So do you think the Jets are going to take him? And then
I hope to God not. I hope the kid breaks his leg or tears his ACL during the season so he won't get drafted number 1 overall.
Let's put that on the record that Mike wants a kid who could make millions of dollars to ruin that opportunity.
Are you kidding me? Why would anybody in the NFL want to draft anybody from USC? Carson Palmer, terrible. Matt Leinart, terrible.
Oh, I mean... one of those has a better track record in the NFL than the other.
Palmer's
Don't put those
had
two
a
in the same conversation.
Career, but Matt Leinart, okay,
bust,
Sanchez,
bust. Well,
exactly.
Mark Sanchez 4-2 in the playoffs.
Yeah,
all on the road
under
buddy.
Rex Ryan.
On the road, man. 4 playoff wins on the road. That's up there. Eli Manning might have one more, I think. Then Anyway. Do you? Yeah, I would agree that he's a little bit overrated. I think, but to Cody's point though, if USC as a whole is not that great of a team, then maybe he's not working with enough talent. I don't know. What do you think?
I just think that you look at their schedule so far, and I'm gonna have to bring it up in order to really fully understand the Sam Darnold. Well, Mike, he's an unquestioned. Like at this point, everyone's kind of treating him like an Andrew Luck or someone who's just I don't know if last year per se, but that no doubter quarterback that's going to be taken number 1.
I think
there wasn't one last year. Trubisky kind of worked his way up to 2, but Darnold was a lot more hyped than Trubisky coming into this year, and Trubisky still went 2. So that kind of leads that people are definitely going to probably take Darnold or at least trade up to get him. Who would you say to take over him quarterback wise? I mean, I know you're a big Baker guy. You would wait.
I would take Josh Rosen.
Okay. Lamar Jackson. Okay, wow, that's a hot take in a way.
Baker Mayfield
to take over Sam Darnold.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in the first. Not necessarily in the first round. I guess he's But
to me, am I saying Darnold's going to be a complete bust?
Yes, you are because you said he's going to be Ryan Leaf.
But at the same time, does that mean he can't go out and prove me wrong? He can.
No, yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And if he does, I will, manly admit that I was wrong when saying what I said.
Right.
But to me, just with the track record of the USC quarterbacks, I don't understand how you can risk taking them.
John David Booty.
Yeah, what happened to him?
Timeout. How did you not, in that entire list of quarterbacks, when
Matt Flynn?
comparing
No,
to
Matt Flynn's
Sam
LSU.
Darnold, did we not throw in Oklahoma State's Mason Rudolph? Who,
Oh, I forgot
by
Mason
far
Rudolph.
and
My
away,
bad.
Well,
has probably been I think with
to
the
be fair,
performance
he's-
against Texas Tech, he reinserted himself into this Heisman race despite the loss.
Telling
to
you right now.
TCU.
he's in the Heisman race, 100%.
The Heisman's coming down to that Oklahoma State game at the end of the year. Hands down.
I
you
can't say
getting
that
rid of
because I think
Barkley?
Saquon Barkley's having a really good year with Penn State. As much as I hate to say
Insane
it,
year.
but
That
it's
leads me
scary.
to my I hate to say it, but. So this is I hate to say it, but
Hang
Darius,
on, before you go into that, I needed to. I remember my point. You were talking about how you thought Sam Darnold wasn't that good. Let's face it, he won the Rose Bowl against the Penn State defense
He
that
did.
we all did like. So
Mike James.
Don't care.
I
I hate USC. I will die. Take it to my grave that I hate USC.
hate to say it, but my Heisman pick, even though I put Saquon Barkley very close as my second pick, my Heisman pick, Darius Geis and his LSU Tigers are the most disappointing team in college football this year. I don't know if that might be a little too much, but it's very disappointing to me. And Geis, his injury is very disappointing to me as well. I thought he was going to be able to do like one of those things where Fournette was the one being hyped. And then here, a year after Fournette's gone, Geis comes in and still he gets the one that gets the Heisman. Fortunately, he's battling some injuries, and he really hasn't been able to get the things going. Darrell Williams as well, and that backfield has been able to steal some touches away from him. But the team as a whole, though, LSU, after a bad loss to Mississippi State, I guess you can give some credit, SEC team as well, but they go on and they lay an egg against Troy. And I don't know. I think Ed Orgeron's time might be limited there for sure, 100%, because why would you go forward with him after a season like this? Recruiting-wise, he already showed that he wasn't really a great recruiter. Did he get Michael Orr in the movie The Blind Side and in real life? Yeah, sure. But I think that I think they should move on from Orgeron probably, especially after what the performances they just did in the season.
question that I want to ask you as
Because they barely
an
beat
LSU
Syracuse,
fan-
to be honest.
As an yeah, but NC State barely beat Syracuse as well. I think Syracuse is having a better year than anticipated. I think that a lot of people thought that it would take another year or two for Syracuse and Dino Babers to have that team turned around. I don't think that they're necessarily going to compete at all in the ACC this year, but give it a couple years. I think Syracuse could be not necessarily a sleeper, but one of those teams that's going to pull off a big upset that will make a difference in the college football playoff in years to come.
Appalachian State, baby.
Here's my question to you, Eric, as an LSU fan. Do you think now, with what has happened with LSU under Ed Orgeron, do you think keeping Les Miles and waiting that out, do you think they should have kept Les Miles?
I was on that train, man. I was definitely on that train. You definitely keep Les Miles. That game against Auburn, are you serious? Like, that Auburn game, to fire him after that game is ridiculous. It came down to, did we get it off or did we not get it off? And they said, right, that they didn't get it off. I forgot exactly what happened in that play. I'm blanking. LSU was one of the team that got it off, and they said that they didn't, and they ended up scoring the touchdown, but they ruled it back. I'm pretty sure that's what happened in that game.
Yeah.
Right. And that was a game. You were so close to winning that game, and then to fire them after that game, like, really? And they go on. That was their first loss of the season. No, that might have been the second. I think it was their second loss of the season. But I thought that they would respond to his firing a little bit better than they did. Losing to Florida that year as well was a bad play call by the future Ed Orgeron and whoever staff was there. I forgot. But I thought Cam Cameron was an okay offensive coordinator too. So I don't know. I think I definitely would have kept Les Miles because no one's hired him, which I find a little peculiar. But I think that recruiting wise, it's just one of those things where you don't hire a guy who's just been so good for so long, especially in a conference you're up against Nick Saban every single year. In a division that you're up against Nick Saban every single year. You don't have to face him every other year like Florida might have to or something like that. You're in their division. You play him every year in Alabama. Les Miles is one of the, unless you're getting that top guy. And they might have thought they were getting a Tom Herman or something like that. But unless you're getting a guy you think could be a top recruiting type guy, you don't get rid of an elite head coach, really, who Les Miles was, in my opinion. So I was very upset with the what do you call them? The people paying all the money, the alumni and the board, the boosters. I was very disappointed that they got to the point where they felt like they needed to force Les Miles out.
And you look at this LSU schedule, they get Florida on the road next week, and then after that,
right,
it's a matchup with the Auburn Tigers, who looked pretty good the other night.
Listen,
against
they
Mississippi
could
State.
come back and the defense can play better. But down this, when it came down to, and I said this at the beginning of the season before the East, not the East, the West, against Alabama. Alabama is going to have their biggest test are going to be the Tigers, Auburn and LSU. And I said that LSU had the defense, but not the offense, and Auburn had the offense, but not necessarily the defense. The jury's still out on Auburn. We can see they're playing, good enough to be in that conversation and be able to pull off
lost
the
so far as Clemson.
Right. And so but LSU's just the offense hasn't been as. Could it be worse than I thought it was going to be? I think it hasn't even lived up to the expectations I thought it would be. And then the defense, can't do everything. And Troy they were able to. It was too little, too late against Troy this past weekend. They just let them beat them for the first 2-3 quarters, and then they try to make that comeback, and it was too little, too late.
And I mean, looking at the LSU schedule, they could easily finish 7-5, and that's a scary thought.
Yeah, and 8-4 I thought was a bad record.
And because this is an SEC team that has been there before and certainly has a storied history, but it looks like this might be the start of some bleak times down in the Bayou.
Yep.
I hate to say it, is going to be about the SEC, and I might have a two-part here. Number one, the SEC is back on top. I think right now the Big Ten, despite being a Wisconsin fan, is at a really weak point when you consider I think Ohio State does not have the quarterback that they need in order to win big games in JT Barrett. I didn't know about this, but apparently he set the all-time touchdown pass record for Ohio State, which is surprising to me.
Yeah.
Michigan and Jim Harbaugh, I don't know what's going on there. Wilton Speight has actually regressed in his sophomore season, and I think, as many people do, that John O'Korn would be the better decision to go with at quarterback right now. But even still, the offense just has not gotten things going in a way that looks like a team that is going to compete for a national championship as well, maybe even a Big Ten championship. Wisconsin stumbled against Northwestern a little bit there, but I kind of saw that coming. Northwestern always comes in and plays anybody tough under Pat Fitzgerald. But you look at what Alabama has done in 2 games. Granted, it's against Vanderbilt and an Ole Miss team that is currently in the midst of the scandal that led to Hugh Freeze's resigning, but they've now scored 50-plus points in the game against Ole Miss's case. They scored 66 points. They only allowed a field goal to Ole Miss. So that is certainly a program that's rolling right now, and the way that the SEC looks, it looks like they're going to match up with either Florida or Georgia, I think, out of the East in the SEC championship game. Georgia looks really, really good. They've already knocked off Notre Dame. They looked really good against a Tennessee team that I think is also going to have a coaching change at the end of this season because Butch Jones has not had the answer.
Butch Jones' head already.
Not only that, think about the turnover that you're going to have in the SEC. Despite it being, as what I think right now, I think they're the best conference right now because the only team that's really threatening them, and I think it's a little bit of a surprise to a lot of people, is Clemson out of the ACC. I thought a lot of people would have seen Clemson either lose to Auburn or lose to Louisville.
I'm telling you right now, Clemson's not in my Final Four.
With Lamar Jackson. And the way that they played, the way they eliminated Lamar Jackson as a threat in that game against Louisville, I thought put Clemson on top. Then to see what they did on the road against Virginia Tech last night, this Clemson team's for real, and I think we're also headed to an Alabama-Clemson final just like we were a year ago. I'm not saying that. I just don't know a team right now that is going to step up
Mike James
and be able to prevent that from happening. I like what's going on in Georgia, but I think they're another year or so from being able to win their own conference in the SEC.
Right. So does that mean you think for the first time ever 2 SEC teams will be in the college football playoff?
I don't think there's going to be 2 teams out of the SEC. I think as a conference they're better than some of these other ones, but the ACC right now, who's going to give Clemson a run for their money? You mentioned Miami, but if Miami falters down the line, who's next? I just don't see anybody else because they've beaten Louisville. They beat Auburn, who looks to be a really good SEC team right now, and they beat Virginia Tech. I just don't see anybody else.
And if Florida State doesn't turn itself around,
exactly, I don't think that game's going to be as big a matchup if Florida State doesn't get things going.
I would agree, and Mike brought up the college football playoff already. I think that's a little too early. I know the rankings will probably start in a month or so now, but
yeah. And looking at it right now, okay, let's look at it. I think the Big 12 actually looks better than anticipated. I think Oklahoma's got a really good shot if they keep it going to get into that Final Four. I think even if they lose, I think a loss any point in the season opens up the opportunity for one of those other Big 12 teams to get in Oklahoma State. Right now, a TCU team that's fighting on their way. I don't know. I think that they're going to fall at some point. Yeah. And it's going to come down to Oklahoma and Oklahoma State.
If Oklahoma beats Oklahoma State, they're in. Just because that win over.
What about
Ohio
the final
State.
though? What about like a potential Big 12 championship game for the first time?
None.
There is.
There's
top
there
two
one
teams
this year?
are gonna be in the
Reinstated,
yeah.
man. For the first time in a while.
I still think.
And then you look at the Pac-12. Mike was talking about UCLA, or one of you guys brought up UCLA. UCLA, I don't think has panned out to be as good as a lot of people were anticipating, even though they have Rosen as their quarterback. We've already talked to
They had
a
an amazing
lot about
comeback back
USC.
in, what was that, week 1 that they had that
against
comeback?
Texas A&M, and that's what I'm talking about in the SEC tournament. I think Kevin Sumlin's in trouble. Butch Jones at Tennessee is in trouble. We're talking Ed Orgeron. There could be a lot of new coaches in the SEC. Another one, Brett Bielema in Arkansas. I think if he can't find a way to get a better season out of the Razorbacks, he could be gone, which as a Wisconsin fan, I wouldn't necessarily mind. I thought the way that he left Wisconsin was a little barbaric, but
Salty.
Hey, we turned out better, didn't we? In the Pac-12, I just don't see a team strong enough. You love Washington under Chris Peterson, but they're so quiet right now, and maybe it's because that we're on the East Coast, they're on the West Coast, that we don't get to see these teams play.
It does
but
happen,
I feel like
yeah.
we have heard more about this Washington State team than we have Washington, even though I get it, Washington State had the big win. But you think that the team that went to the college football playoff a year ago,
Yeah, definitely.
you'd hear a lot more
still
about
Jake
him.
Browning, right? I mean, he's still
Exactly,
there.
and that's the thing is I saw his name as a quarterback, and I'm like, wow, wasn't that the guy that led them? And now you haven't heard anything about him right now. So right now, I think you're looking at your championship potentially being Alabama and Clemson because nobody else has really shown some kind of life. Penn State,
3
maybe.
straight
Penn
years,
State, I don't want to see it. I like when there's a lot of parity. I like the thing I liked about the college football playoff was that we were seeing a new team here and there.
You don't get much parity with Nick Saban, and
You don't.
and
He's a really
even
good coach.
Dabo
He's great
Swinney
at
at
what
this
he
point.
does, and that's the thing.
Big nose.
You have to give Dabo Swinney a lot of credit as well. And Penn State, Penn State almost lost to Iowa on the road, and I get it. Iowa's a really tough place to play. Yeah, tough place to play. But I thought Penn State should have gone in there and really dominated against the Hawkeyes. And not only that, but they still have to match up with Ohio State and Michigan. So there's that potential for Penn State. While it doesn't look like it right now, it looks like they're the better team in the East. I think they could end up not being able to make it through that schedule. And obviously, one of those 3 teams is not going to be playing in the Big Ten championship game, which I think hurts their chances of even making the college football playoff.
All right. I agree with a lot of what you said. I think there's a lot more conversations to be had after some bigger games happen for sure.
Yeah, and it's still
Michigan,
early
we
in
didn't
the
even bring up
season.
Michigan and think their potential of possibly sneaking their way in there. And the real question is Ohio State overrated? And I wonder if you guys will be validated at some point here. I know they already lost Oklahoma, but they're still in it. I mean, especially
no doubt about it.
until Penn State. Penn State game. That Penn State game will probably decide it for sure. But yeah, the SEC to me has always been one of the best. I know it's kind of tough because every single year it's Alabama so it almost seems like it's just one team representing every single year. But the SEC, and I really think that Georgia and even Florida to some extent, I think might give Alabama more of a scare this year, especially potentially in that championship game, something that they've never really had. They never really have to worry about that championship game because the better teams are usually on that west side of the division. So,
but even Florida has really looked vulnerable.
They had the Hail Mary,
they
right?
won against Tennessee. They shouldn't have won that game, at least not as early as they did on that Hail Mary. And then last week they played.
They lost, right?
No, Florida won.
No, they beat us. Dang it, this is
Kentucky.
a bad time.
They beat Kentucky.
Kentucky?
Barely
No,
beat
they beat Kentucky last week.
They beat I believe it was an SEC team.
Yeah.
No, it was
'cause
Kentucky last week. It was.
Was it Kentucky?
Yeah.
Man, this is a bad time.
No,
right?
no. That was last week. That was last week.
No, man, I believe you're wrong. They beat Vanderbilt.
Was it?
Yes.
Yeah.
They beat Vanderbilt 38-24. And I don't know, you look at these wins that they've got. They beat Tennessee, they beat Kentucky, they beat Vanderbilt. Certainly looks good, but you still have to match up with Georgia. They'll get LSU, which would have been a marquee game, but
Right.
I wonder which direction they're trending in right now. And the rest of the way out, once they play Georgia, which will be late October, look at the schedule. Missouri, South Carolina, UAB, Florida State. If Florida beats Georgia, forget about it. Florida's going to end up playing the SEC championship game because I don't see them losing any of those games on the way out.
All right, man. I agree. I agree for the most part. Do I agree
it's-
with you a little too much on this now?
No, I think this was just one that it's really early in the season, so I think there's a lot more to develop,
Yeah.
but I think it was a lot of fun to break into college football this way. So
100%.
if you want to tune into any of the other podcasts that we've had for Sittin Sportside, go over to youtube.com/ YouTube.com/team1045 or 1055theteam.com and click on whichever you like. We've got baseball up there. We've got professional football, a little bit of hockey. We've had
Playoffs.
tennis at one point, and especially the MLB playoff.
Yeah,
preview,
we
so
love
tune
talking
into those.
tennis, Cody and I. Real quick, what do you think about Nadal and Federer teaming up? That was cool.
It was cool. I think it goes to show that those guys have a lot of passion for the sport still, and it's not just because they have all the accolades that they have right now. They still believe that there's more stuff to play for.
Right, the two of them had all four major Grand Slam titles.
Yeah.
Two each. So didn't no one gain on each other. So that was cool.
So that'll do it for us. Once again, if you any other ones you want to tune into, it was nice to have Mike James with us
Mike
for a
James?
second straight
Finally back
podcast.
after 6 months
And we'll
or
hope
more.
to do another one soon with the three of us. I think it's a lot more fun when we've got all these different opinions. And
I agree.
We'll see if we are able to keep this going with the I told you so and the I hate to say it, but